Thank you all for joining us here at I-80 Sports, where today we are previewing the Central Division in the NHL for 2023-2024. Guys, thank you all for joining us here again at I-80 Sports. All for joining us here again at I-80 Sports. Make sure that you subscribe down below, youtube.com/I-80 Sports, and tell us your thoughts down in the comment section below with who you think are the teams to beat in the Central Division and who's looking worse for wear after a busy off season. Make sure you join the conversation down below. Hit the like button if you like our content and hit the bell notification so that way you guys know when our content goes live on our YouTube channel. If for whatever reason you are still on X, make sure you follow us down below at I-80_Sports NHL. And if you follow us already, thank you guys so much because we greatly value all of your support. I'm Brian. He's Tom. Tom, how are you doing today?
Doing well. And here we are. We are previewing the Central Division today. A little bit stronger than the Pacific Division. I wouldn't say it's the strongest division in the league by any means, but it's a little more of an interesting division to pick at, I guess you could say, because there's some teams in here that you don't really know where they may go, and there's some teams that you already know where they're going. So just get right to it.
It's funny. I feel like with our previews, we've almost been moving from weakest conference slowly but surely to strongest conference. And this is just another bump in the road as we go along, and we're just getting a little bit stronger along the way. This is probably the strongest Western Conference division amongst the Pacific Division and the Central Division. I think the Central Division is probably the strongest out of the bunch at the moment, and you're about to find out why. Let's talk first, diving right into the deep end. We're going to talk additions and subtractions within the Central Division. Just general, who was added to some of these Central Division teams and who have found new homes throughout the offseason. So let's run on down through the Central Division, these key additions and subtractions. So starting with the Arizona Coyotes, starting with some key additions here in Jason Zucker, Matt Dumba, Sean Dursey, Alex Kerfoot, Nick Bukestad, Troy Stetcher, Travis Dermott, Zach Sanford, and rookie Logan Cooley. With key subtractions in Christian Fisher, Zach Cassian, Patrick Nemeth, Brett Ritchie, Connor Mackey, Lauren Dalfan, Boca Amama, and John Sebastian D. To the Chicago Blackhawks, some key additions here: Ryan Donato, Nick Foligno, Taylor Hall, Corey Perry, and rookie this upcoming season. I don't know how much playing time he's going to get. His name is Connor Bedard. More to watch on him. He might get a few games this upcoming season. We'll just have to see. Key subtractions for the Chicago Blackhawks here in Alex Stalock, Caleb Jones, Ian Mitchell, Alec Regula, Juhar Kyra, Anders Bjork, Anton Udobin, and former captain Jonathan Taves. Moving on to the Colorado Avalanche, some key additions here: Ryan Johansson, Ross Colton, Jonathan Drowan, Miles Wood, Chris Wagner, and Tomas Tatar. Key subtractions here in JT Compher, Evan Rodriguez, Alex Newhook, Matt Nieto, Eric Johnson, Lars Eller, Dennis Mulligan, and Keith Kincaid. Really interesting names on the subtraction side of things with Colorado. More to come on that side. To the Dallas Stars here, key additions in Matt Duchene, Sam Steele, Craig Smith, Gavin Bayreuther, and Derek Pulio. And two key subtractions here: Luke Glendening, Colin Miller, Riley Tuft, Max Domi, and Will Butcher. To the Minnesota Wild, some key additions here. Not a lot going on here for the Minnesota Wild. Pat Maroon and Vinny Lettieri. And key subtractions here in Matt Dumba, Gustav Nyquist, Oscar Sundqvist, Sam Steele, Ryan Reeves, and John Klingberg. To the Nashville Predators, some key additions in Ryan O'Reilly, Gustav Nyquist, Luke Shen, and Dennis Guryanov. Key subtractions in Matt Duchene, Ryan Johansson, Cal Foote, and Zach Sanford. On to the St. Louis Blues. Some key additions here in Kevin Hayes, Mackenzie McEachern, Malcolm Subban, and a returning Stanley Cup champion, Oscar Sundqvist, with key subtractions in Tyler Pitlick, Matthew Highmore, Logan Brown, Steven Santini, Dmitry Semirakov, Thomas Greiss, and Josh Lavo. Lastly, the Winnipeg Jets. Some key additions here. Alex Iafallo, Gabe Velarde, Rasmus Kupari, Laurent Brossoit, and Colin Delia. And key subtractions in Pierre-Luc Dubois, Blake Wheeler, Sam Gagne, Sakum, oh my God, I cannot speak today, Mina Leinen, Carson Kuhlman, and David Riddick. I realize that because I just cannot speak the English language today, that there were definitely a few names that I totally butchered, but you can roast me down in the comment section below. I'll gladly take it. So, with a lot of these additions and subtractions, I know I just threw a lot of names out there, Tom. We're going to start here with you. Do you have any favorite transactions from the offseason within the Central Division?
So, I mean, obviously Chicago's the biggest one, but I mean, was that really a move? That was a gimme. They won the draft lottery, and you'd have to be out of your mind to not pick Connor Bedard. You'd have to be out of your mind. So we know what they did. I like what they did, bringing in some guys like Foligno, Taylor Hall, and Corey Perry. I'm going to talk about that a little more later on because that can go about one or two ways. And I know I've spoken about it before, but we're here again. So I'll bring it up in passing later on. I'm not going to go completely into it because you've already heard me talk about it a few times. I like what the Avs did. That hole at the second line center position last year, I guess, was bigger than a lot of us thought it was going to be. For a time in the year that they won the Stanley Cup, Nazem Kadri not only led the team in scoring, led the whole league in scoring, and he was their second line center. It was a big gaping hole last year. Now, I don't know if Ryan Johansson is going to be Nazem Kadri, but it's still an improvement. It's still definitely an improvement. And now bringing Thomas Tatar in, remember, the last time we spoke about some offseason moves, he wasn't there yet. They hadn't done anything yet. Bringing him in is huge for the Avs. It really is. The Avs, I think, knew what they had last year. You have McKinnon. You have guys like Rantanen and obviously Cale Makar, and you don't know about Gabe Landeskog right now. So, I mean, the best thing you could do is you have your core players there. The best thing you can do is just replenish that depth, and I think that's exactly what they did. I love what they did with all of their moves. Believe it or not, I also like what Arizona did. Now, again, Logan Cooley, that was a gimme. That was a gimme. It didn't take a lot to do that. So, but Jason Zucker and Alex Kerfoot should improve them. I just don't know if it's going to improve them into a playoff team per se. I think they'll be better, but I just don't know about how much better. I like what Nashville did too. Excuse me. Ryan O'Reilly was a nice signing. It was a nice signing to play first line center. We saw what he did with the Leafs last year. We saw what he did down in St. Louis. The guy can play. He can still play hockey. He's still a very good player. One of the few players left who doesn't wear a visor as well. But it was a nice way to offset losing Matt Duchene. And I think Ryan O'Reilly at this juncture is a better player than Matt Duchene. So we'll see. We'll see what happens here with some of these teams, and it's going to be interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I gotta be honest here. I honestly really like what every team in the Central Division did this summer, minus maybe the St. Louis Blues, and also to a lesser extent the Winnipeg Jets. But we'll get there. Everyone in this division has worked hard to improve this offseason in different ways. And I'll highlight that now with the Colorado Avalanche kind of going twofold. As Tom had mentioned before, you have your core guys to build around here in Mikko Rantanen and Nathan McKinnon, Cale Makar. You have the guys there that you're building around. And then other names that, are certainly being built around right now as well within that team, like Devin Taves. But you do still need to bolster that lineup. And the biggest glaring part of that team last year was there was a gaping hole left by Nazem Kadri last year at the center position. And lo and behold, they went out and filled it with two players, adding Ryan Johansson and Ross Colton. And by adding Ross Colton too, they also are getting a little bit faster in their bottom six too, by also adding, the aforementioned Ross Colton and Miles Wood as well. And I feel like they did a really nice job setting themselves up for depth down the middle and just in that top 9. I mean, you look at that third line, just to give you a preview of what we're going to be talking about from Daily Faceoffs projections right now. That third line right now projects to be Miles Wood, Ross Colton, and Tomas Tatar for the Colorado Avalanche this year. And I think that is a very good third line. It's an above average third line. And I think all three of them could have been guys that could have played top 6 minutes in other cities if they had chosen to go anywhere else in the offseason. So really nice moves by the Colorado Avalanche, and really savvy moves, if you ask me. The Arizona Coyotes, as Tom mentioned before, they might not be world breakers this year. They might not be playoff contenders, if you will, but they're going to be a dangerous team to teams that are on the bubble, and Arizona could easily burst those bubbles this year. And they really intrigue me in my mind, is the much awaited debut of my potential Calder favorite this year. Spoiler alert, Logan Cooley. I think Logan Cooley has a lot of what it takes to not only make the Arizona Coyotes more competitive moving forward, but I also think that he has the ability and the projection this year to maybe even win the Calder Trophy this year. I think there's going to be quite the competition this year for that trophy. It's going to be a fun competition this year for the Calder Trophy. But I think Logan Cooley is very comfortably in that conversation of favorites before the season begins. Logan Cooley could be the player that Clayton Keller has needed all this time in Arizona. Moving on from Arizona here, the Nashville Predators grabbing Ryan O'Reilly was surprising. I really did not have Ryan O'Reilly going to the Nashville Predators in the offseason, but I really like the move for them. It's a transitional year for them of sorts, so bringing a veteran in Ryan O'Reilly to play alongside key veterans such as Philip Forsberg and Roman Josi could be a lot of fun to see, and I think Nashville is still going to be a very competitive team, despite losing Matt Duchene, despite the change at GM over to Barry Trotz. I think Nashville could be a lot of fun to watch this year. Lastly, because I don't want to completely monopolize this time talking about the things I liked, Chicago might not be a very good team this year. I have them pegged right now as right at the bottom of the barrel, not only in the Central Division, but almost certainly in the National Hockey League this year as well. But I really like the idea of signing Taylor Hall to play alongside Connor Bedard. I think both of their speeds really match up well together. And Taylor Hall is a proven entity of a veteran that plays well with rookies and does a good job to bring out the better of their game. And to me, it could be much akin to watching in the early 2019-2020 season when Taylor Hall played alongside a rookie Jack Hughes for the New Jersey Devils. So it could be a lot of fun to watch. This could be that combination 2.0, maybe even the better, more improved version of that for Taylor Hall. So I got to think that Taylor Hall is excited to be in Chicago to play alongside a potential franchise player in Connor Bedard. It's going to be a lot of fun to watch this year for sure for them. Moving on from this point, we talked about transactions that we liked, but overall, Tom, I want to turn it over to you on this one. Which team do you feel like made the most improvements in this offseason, and who, in your mind, is looking worse for wear coming into this season? Who's not as good on paper this year?
Well, I didn't mention them earlier, but I love what Dallas did yet again. They just keep supplementing the depth. You already have two young guns up top in Rupe Hintz and Jason Robertson. But I like what they did bringing in Matt Duchene and Craig Smith. Both solid options to bolster an already bolstered bottom 9. Remember, in that bottom 9, and I just had the depth chart up, and I have to bring it back up. I apologize. You have guys in there like Jamie Benn and Tyler Seguin. But now you're going to play Matt Duchene on line 3 and Craig Smith on line 4. Craig Smith, during his days in Nashville, he averaged about 20 goals a season. During his time in Boston, averaged about 15. It's great for Dallas. Yet again, Dallas is going to be a scary team to play against come playoff time. I just can't stop singing their praises. They're a good team, and they've only gotten better, Dallas. They really, really have. Colorado, they want that cutback. I mentioned it above, bringing in Tomas Tatar. Bringing in Ross Colton, bringing in guys like Ryan Johansson yet again. All very good signings. In terms of the worst, well, St. Louis was giving us the signs last year that they were going to tear the team down. There was no doubt about it. They let O'Reilly go at the deadline. They let Tarasenko go at the deadline. So I can't sit here and say, oh, St. Louis got worse when they basically let us know last year. They basically gave us the solid, okay, guys, guess what? We're tearing the team apart. We're going to tear the team apart, and it's time to rebuild. So that's that. But yet again, Minnesota, I don't get it. I'm sorry, I don't. You lost Matt Dumba. You lost Gustav Nyquist. You lost Oscar Sundqvist. That's going to hurt you to begin with. And yet again, they never addressed the hole left by Kevin Fiala leaving for LA. Kevin Fiala was the second most important player on that team behind Kirill Kaprizov. They never addressed the hole that Fiala left. And it's just how long are they going to go and rely on Kirill Kaprizov before other teams get deeper and better and start passing them? Teams like the Arizona Coyotes, who you mentioned. Teams like the Chicago Blackhawks, who are going to have arguably the best player in the league in a couple of years. And just how long are they going to sit there with Kaprizov on line 1 and a bunch of marginal guys on lines 2, 3, and 4 and marginal guys on D? And granted, you have a good goalie in Marc-Andre Fleury. Eventually, he's going to retire. He's not the youngest player in the league anymore. How much longer is it going to be for Minnesota? I'm sorry. I'm not buying it with them. I'm not. Will they make the playoffs this year? Yeah, I'd say so. I'm not going to say they won't. But just how much longer is it going to be before they're going to be watching the train go by? Like they did with Marian Gaborik. This is akin to what they did with Marian Gaborik 20 or so years ago. They just put the team on his back, did nothing to give him any help. And then when his contract was up in 2009, guess where he went? To New York. He didn't stay there. So I'm sorry. I see a lot of parallels to that.
I'm going to play devil's advocate here for a second, pun intended for me being a diehard Devils fan. But I don't know. To me, I do feel like Minnesota has answered a few of those things that you have in question here, Tom. And it might not be fully fledged out yet, but I think the answers could be there as early as this year in terms of the production, maybe even next year. And to that point, in addressing the replacing Kevin Fiala for the Minnesota Wild, first of all, really difficult to do. He was a key contributor on some really good playoff running teams for the Minnesota Wild. But I honestly think that you have your replacement on that roster, and he was drafted a few years ago, and he's probably playing second line minutes this year. Matthew Boldy. I think Matthew Boldy, is going to make a significant jump this year in production, playing alongside a healthy Joel Eriksson-Ek and playing alongside a healthy Marcus Johansson as well. And maybe even, that line can evolve a little bit over time as well. Marcus Johansson does not have to be married to that second line. But Matthew Boldy, I think, is almost certainly married to being in that top 6 this year. And I think if Matthew Boldy's game jumps in the way that I think it could be the answer to not having Kevin Fiala anymore. Now, to the Marc-Andre Fleury bit, Marc-Andre Fleury, he's not getting any younger, and there's no secret about that. The first ballot Hall of Famer, he doesn't have much time left in his career for sure. But Philip Gustafsson is almost certainly going to be taking quite a bit of time this year between the pipes, and he did honestly very well last year in that time. And waiting in the wings right behind Marc-Andre Fleury in the AHL, developing his game pretty well, and is one of the higher goaltending prospects in the NHL at the moment, Jesper Wallstedt. Not to be understated with Jesper Wallsted's game. There's a reason why he was the first goaltender off the board a few years ago. He's going to be potentially, if he lives up to his potential, better than Philip Gustafsson, and could be one of the better starting goaltenders in the Central Division in the next, 4 years, more than likely. Which you would hope by then, in the next 4 years, Kirill Kaprizov is still with this Minnesota Wild team, and this is a team that has seen the playoffs in those years to come and keeps building on those appearances over time. So I think the answers are certainly there, whereas I feel like, as you mentioned before, in the early to mid 2000s, 2003 to 2007, there really wasn't the help that Minnesota was trying to give to a franchise player in Marian Gaborik, but I do feel like Minnesota has tried to learn from those lessons since then, and even tried to learn from the lessons from 2012 as well, and the contracts that they gave out throwing caution to the wind. I do feel like that they have done enough to try to build around Kirill Kaprizov. It didn't quite work out last year because of the injuries to this team, but I think so long as the lineup stays healthy, I think we could see a very good Minnesota Wild team this year. Beyond that, and we hadn't mentioned them before, like Tom had mentioned, but it should not be understated how good Dallas could be this year. And by adding Matt Duchene, who's possibly playing third line minutes on this team, I think Dallas could be set up to be a very scary team. And I'll say the bold statement. I don't know how bold this statement truly is. Tom, you can tell me if this is a bold statement or not, and I wouldn't mind your reaction right now on this. Jake Ottinger is a top 5 goaltender in the NHL.
I'd say yes. He really did a lot of good for them last year. Got him to a Western Conference final last year. One that I thought that they would win. I'd say he's top 5. I'd say he's right up there. Hell yeah, he is. Yeah. I don't know necessarily if they have that Norris Trophy caliber defenseman right now, but in all the other areas, they're top notch.
Yeah, and I tend to agree. Their defense is just solid. And that's the best word I can use to describe this defense is solid. The closest thing you have to a Norris Trophy winner, and even then, if you have a defenseman like this, I think you're really happy. Miro Heiskanen, probably one of the best right-handed defensemen in the league. Definitely top 5 in my mind in right-handed defensemen. He is very good and probably the closest thing you have to a Norris Trophy winner. But their defense is just consistent, solid, and we'll go over that lineup in just a little bit, but just looking through Dallas's lineup, just steady improvement year after year, just chipping away at just little improvements every single year. You added Joe Pavelski one year. You draft a Wyatt Johnston one year. You add Evgeny Dadonov at the deadline one year. You add a Matt Duchene and Craig Smith in free agency for pennies on the dollar. These are the little things that make up Stanley Cup contending teams over time. So I think Dallas, is a very, very, very clear front runner in the Central Division this year. But watch out for Colorado, as we mentioned before. I think Colorado has certainly solved some of their glaring issues throughout the last season in their Stanley Cup hangover. Arizona, I could see being a dark horse. But on the flip side, I say teams that you need to look out for come the trade deadline season. The St. Louis Blues and the Winnipeg Jets. I think Rich Bowness has made his statements clear with the Winnipeg Jets that there's going to be a changing of the guard over the course of the next year or so with this team. And you're going to see some veteran turnover in short time and short order coming up here for Winnipeg. And it might not be pretty, and you might see players get dealt that you might not see a good return for if you're a Winnipeg fan and thinking that you could have gotten more. But the problem is when you play your hand and you say, oh, I don't know about this guy, I don't know about that guy, I feel like we could have done better, but this guy. When you set that up, you're also setting yourself up to not maximize what you can get for a particular player, what you can get for a Connor Hellebuck, what you can get for a Mark Scheifele or Nikolai Ehlers later on. So Winnipeg, I think, is going to be a team that I think is going to really start tearing things down even more. They tore things down this offseason a little bit, but we're going to see more of a changing of the guard over the course of this season as well. And the same thing with St. Louis, as Tom alluded to before. St. Louis made it no secret. They were, going to start tearing things apart from that 2019 Stanley Cup winning team. We saw it last year with the trade of Vladimir Tarasenko and the fact that he has not returned. We saw it with Ryan O'Reilly being dealt as well. Could there be more to come? We'll just have to see what happens with the St. Louis Blues, but they're definitely a team to monitor this year for sure in terms of where players could honestly go. All right, moving right along here, we've got to talk about some of these lineup breakdowns. We've alluded to a couple of lines with a few teams, but why don't we actually take a look at what some of these teams could look like come opening night. So these projected lineups come courtesy of Daily Faceoff. So I should mention, take it with a grain of salt. These are not definite lines. These are not for sure lines. So take it with a grain of salt. And if you have a better lineup combination for your favorite team or a team that you're following, let us know in the comment section below. We certainly want to hear about it and hear what your thoughts are down below. We're going to be going through the forward lines, the defense lines, as well as the starting goaltender and backup goaltenders for every team. Daily Faceoff does list power play and penalty kill lines, but just to save time, we're not going to go through them. Certainly, if you want to look them up on your own, hit up dailyfaceoff.com and look up the lineup breakdowns for every team in the NHL. They have all 32 teams broken down right now, so you can check it out at your leisure right now. But let's go through this right now. I'm going to project right now the lines that could be seen on opening night. If I can actually, there we go. I was about to say, if my computer actually wants to work with me. Haha. All right. So should pop up in just a second. Possibly. There we go. Got it. So thank you for bearing with me awkwardly there. Starting with the Arizona Coyotes here on the top line, projected right now, we could see Clayton Keller, Barrett Hayton, and Nick Schmaltz on the top line. Moving to the second line, Jason Zucker, Logan Cooley, and Dylan Guenther. On the third line for the Arizona Coyotes, Matthias Maselli, Nick Bukestad, and Lawson Krause. And picking up the fourth line, Alex Kerfoot, Jack McBain, and Travis Boyd. Looking at the defense right now for the Arizona Coyotes, we've got JJ Moser with a recently acquired Matthew Dumba. On the second pairing of defense, we've got UC Valimaki with a recently acquired Sean Dursey. And on the third pairing, a recently acquired Troy Stetcher paired with Josh Brown. Moving down to the goaltending, we've got Carl Vejmelka with Connor Ingram backing up. And of course, you see just the body count down below of injuries and all players used to just help with the cap there for the Arizona Coyotes. Moving on down to the Chicago Blackhawks. On the top line projected on opening night, we've got Taylor Hall with Connor Bedard and Tyler Johnson. On the second line, Philip Kurashev with Lucas Reichel and Andreas Athanasiou. On the third line, Ryan Donato with Cole Gutman and Taylor Radish. And on the fourth line, Nick Foligno, Jason Dickinson, and Corey Perry. A grizzled vet line, if I do say so myself. Looking at the defensive pairings for the Chicago Blackhawks, we've got Wyatt Kaiser with Seth Jones. On the second pairing, Kevin Korchinski with Connor Murphy. And on the third pairing for defense, we've got Jared Tenorti with Nikita Zaitsev. Looking at the goaltending for the Chicago Blackhawks, we've got Peter Mrazek as your starting goaltender with Arvid Soderblom as your backup right now. It should be noted that allegedly Colin Blackwell is injured, even though it does say none. So take that for what you will, to say the least. Looking now at the Colorado Avalanche 2021 Stanley Cup winner. No, sorry, 2022 Stanley Cup winners. I'm going back in time too far. On the top line, we've got Jonathan Drouin with Nathan McKinnon and Mikko Rantanen. On the second line for the Colorado Avalanche, Arturi Lekkinen with Ryan Johansson and Valerie Nichushkin. On the third line, a whole new cast, as I alluded to before, Miles Wood with Ross Colton and Tomas Tatar. And on the fourth line, Andrew Cogliano, Ben Myers, and Logan O'Connor. Looking down to the defense now for the Colorado Avalanche. On the top pairing, Devin Taves and Cale Makar. On the second pairing, Bowen Byram with Josh Manson. And on the third pairing for the Colorado Avalanche, Jack Johnson and Samuel Girard. Looking down at the goaltending, our 1A, 1B situation for the Colorado Avalanche, we've got Alexander Georgiev as your 1A and Pavel Francouz as your 1B for the Colorado Avalanche. Should be noted that Gabriel Landeskog is on long-term IR. He is likely not going to play at all this season, but he's going to be a name to monitor over the course of this year for any updates that come along. Now, looking over at the Dallas Stars, on the top line for the Dallas Stars, we've got Jason Robertson with Rupe Hintz and Joe Pavelski. On the second line, Jamie Benn with Wyatt Johnston and Evgeny Dadonov. Looking at the third line for the Dallas Stars, we've got Mason Marchment with Tyler Seguin and Matt Duchene. And on the fourth line, we've got Ty Dellandrea with Radek Faksa and Craig Smith. Going down to the defense now for the Dallas Stars, we've got Ryan Sutter with Miro Heiskanen. On the second pairing, we've got Thomas Harley with Yanni Hakanpää. And on the third pairing, Esa Lindell and Nils Lundqvist. Hey, that's a name you know quite well there, Tom.
Yeah.
Just a bit. The goaltending, as we mentioned before, Jake Ottinger is your starting goaltender for the Dallas Stars with Scott Wedgwood backing him up just like last year. Moving on down, scrolling on down here to the Minnesota Wild here. Looking at the top line here for the Minnesota Wild, Kirill Kaprizov with Ryan Hartman and Mats Zuccarello. Hey, look at that. Another name you know. It's like deja vu. Looking at the second line here for the Minnesota Wild, we got Matthew Boldy with Joel Erikssonek and Marcus Johansson. Hey, deja vu for me too. Looking at the third line here for the Minnesota Wild, we've got Marcus Foligno with Marco Rossi and Frederick Gaudreau. And on the fourth line for the Minnesota Wild, a recently acquired Patrick Maroon pairing with Connor Dewar and Brandon Duhaime or Duheim. Could be one or the other. I'm bad at English. Looking at the defensive pairings for the Minnesota Wild, we've got Jacob Middleton with Jared Spurgeon. On the second pairing, Jonas Brodin with Callan Addison. And on the third pairing, Alex Goligoski with Brock Faber. Looking down at the goaltending here for the Minnesota Wild, it'll certainly be a 1A, 1B situation here. Philip Gustafson serving as your 1A with Marc-Andre Fleury serving as your 1B. Mason Shaw here listed on IR. Could be a name to monitor moving forward. Going on down to the Nashville Predators here in the Central Division. Looking at our top line for the Nashville Predators, we've got Philip Forsberg with Ryan O'Reilly and Denis Gurianov. On the second line, we've got Gustav Nyquist with Cody Glass and Philip Tomasino. On the third line, we've got Cole Smith with Thomas Novak and Luke Evangelista. And on the fourth line for the Nashville Predators, Juuso Parssinen, Colton Sissons, and Yakov Trenin. Looking at the defensive pairings here for the Nashville Predators, on the top pairing, we've got Roman Josi with a recently signed Luke Schenn. Second pairing for the Nashville Predators is Ryan McDonough and Tyson Barrie. And on the third pairing, we've got Dante Fabro with Alexander Carrier. Gotta say, that is a deceptively good defense for the Nashville Predators this year. That interesting. Goaltending here for the Nashville Predators, we've got Jussi Saros as your starting goaltender with Kevin Lankinen backing him up. Scrolling on down now, all the way down to the S's to get down to the St. Louis Blues here. Looking at a top line right now for the St. Louis Blues of Pavel Buchnevich, Robert Thomas, and Jordan Kyrou. Looking at the second line here, Brandon Saad, Braden Schenn, and Kasperi Kapanen. Looking at the third line now for the St. Louis Blues, Jacob Vrana, Kevin Hayes, and Sammy Blais. And lastly, on the fourth line, we've got Alexei Toropchenko, Oscar Sundqvist, and Jake Neighbors. Going down to the defensive pairing here for the St. Louis Blues, we've got Nick Leddy with Colton Parayko. On the second pairing, Torrey Krug with Justin Falk. And on the third pairing defense for the St. Louis Blues, we've got Scott Perunovich and Robert Bortuzzo. Going down to the goaltending, we know him, we love him. The starting goaltender for the St. Louis Blues, Jordan Binnington, and Joel Hofer backing him up. And finally, moving on down here to the final team to cover here in the Central Division, we've got the Winnipeg Jets, who look a little bit different this year. Looking at the top line for the Winnipeg Jets, we've got Kyle Connor with Mark Scheifele and Gabriel Velarde. And on the second line, we've got Nikolai Ehlers with Cole Perfetti and Nino Niederreiter. On the third line, Alex Iafallo with Adam Lowry and Mason Appleton. And looking at the fourth line right now for the Winnipeg Jets, Morgan Barron with Rasmus Kupari and Vladislav Nemestikov. On the defense right now for the Winnipeg Jets, we've got on our top pairing Josh Morrissey with Dylan DeMello. On the second pairing, Brendan Dillon with Neil Pionk. And on the third pairing for the Winnipeg Jets, we've got Dylan Sandberg and Nate Schmidt. Going on down to the goaltending here for the Winnipeg Jets, starting goaltender Connor Hellebuck, and backing him up, a returning Laurent Brossoit after a brief trip to Vegas. Wonder how that worked out for him. Even still. Let's cut out this right now. Perfect. All right. We have a lot to unpack here with these lineups. So, Tom, I'm going to start with you here. So, with these lineups and everything that I just threw out here, who do you think is looking the strongest out of the lineups we just looked at, and who's looking the weakest?
Well, the obvious are Colorado and Dallas. Now, Dallas, I think, has a stronger depth than Colorado, but Colorado has a stronger top line talent, I would say, for Colorado. Two weakest are, your obvious teams that are saying they're trying to be weak. St. Louis is an obvious rebuilder. Winnipeg also is heading there. So St. Louis and Winnipeg, I'll say, are the two weakest.
Yeah, I think they're pretty easy choices. I think easily some of the stronger teams here that I mentioned, Colorado is really strong this year. Dallas is really strong this year. Minnesota, don't sleep on Minnesota this year. I think they could probably slide in as the number 3 team here in the Western Conference. And to me, I think they're 3 of the stronger teams here, not only in the Central Division, but of the Western Conference. Arizona and Nashville, they're not necessarily bad teams at all. They are more so pretty mid. You look up and down. Nashville, I think, has a deceptively good defense this year. Arizona has a much improved defense. Looking at that right-hand side, Matt Dumba on the right-hand side with Sean Dursey on the right-hand side. They've really done a lot to improve this team this year. And it's not just, fluff signings this year, I feel like. I really feel like they made purposeful signings this year. St. Louis and Winnipeg they're decent on paper. You look it up and down that lineup. You look up and down St. Louis's lineup, but it's just like, who's going to be there by March? Honestly, it's great on paper, but we'll see who's there. Same thing with Winnipeg. Great on paper, but we'll see who's there. Also, going to go out and say it because I know a few other news outlets have certainly, drummed it up too. We used to talk about how much that Alexander Barkov for the Florida Panthers is the most underrated player in the league. Can we truly say now that Kyle Connor is almost certainly the most underrated player in the league? He has had 30-plus goal seasons for the past 3 or 4 seasons straight now, and really is not acknowledged for just how good he is. He's a name that I'll be really interested to see if he sticks around with Winnipeg, if they keep him as a building block come March. But yeah, what I mentioned before with St. Louis and Winnipeg, lineups are good, but the circumstances are volatile right now. And I could see both of these teams really blowing up either before the deadline or right at the trade deadline this year. And the Chicago Blackhawks, there's a lot to be excited for this team in the future, especially with Connor Bedard. But they have a few years until they see a massive jump in the standings, and they're just going to bide their time in the bottom of the division and wait for their time to strike near the top. They're going to wait until Colorado, gets older. They're going to wait till St. Louis and Winnipeg are out of the picture to really make that massive jump in the standings. I think in no time flat, we could see Chicago really rising in the standings in the next few years. That time is not this year, though. They're going to be, I honestly do think that they're bottom feeders this year for sure. All right. Before we wrap things up for our episode, we got to give our standings predictions, and there's a lot that can change in the coming weeks, coming months, into the new year 2024, but we'll just give our predictions based on what we're looking at the lineups, based on the circumstances that we talked about. Tom, I'll start with you. What does 1 through 8 look like in the Central Division?
All right, here we go. First place, obvious, Colorado. Second place, obvious, Dallas. Third place is where I'm going to make a bold prediction here. Nashville, I'm going for third place. Fourth place, Minnesota. I know you talk about Matt Boldy. He had himself a nice little year last year, 60 some odd points in about 80 games. We got to see if he builds on it and can fill that spot that Kevin Fiala left. So I'm going Minnesota fourth. Fifth place, let's have some fun with this. Arizona. Let's have a little fun. Sixth place, let's have a little more fun. Chicago. Seventh place, Winnipeg. Eighth place, St. Louis. That could be interchangeable.
Yeah, at that bottom, like 6 through 8 can change ever so slightly, I think. Yeah, all right. Here we go with my prediction. It's going to be quite different from Tom's here. First place, Dallas Stars. I do think they actually have what it takes to not only win the Central Division this year and be top in the Central Division, they have a legitimate chance of maybe even being the President Trophy winner this year. I do firmly believe that can actually happen for Dallas this year if everything shakes right. Coming in second, right behind them, hot on their tail, is going to be the Colorado Avalanche this year. They're neck and neck with each other. They could be interchangeable, but I think Dallas has the edge here in lineup depth alone. The Minnesota Wild, I've got finishing third right now. I do really like Nashville, but I think Minnesota is going to keep building on what they've got going right now, and I think they do have the lineup right now that finishes third. Fourth, I've got the Nashville Predators. Honestly, I could see Minnesota and Nashville being interchangeable. I'm not saying that Nashville can't finish third, but just from pure hype on that roster, I think Minnesota, has what it takes to finish third right now. Nashville will finish fourth. In fifth place, I'm agreeing with you here, Tom. Arizona. I really do think Arizona has what it takes to finish in fifth in this division and really just be absolute heartbreakers for some teams this year. Arizona, I think, is going to be like new Buffalo Sabres this year. Just going to be a fun team to kind of watch, even though they're playing in a 5,000 person arena. I think the product on the ice is going to get significantly better this year. I think they're going to be a lot of fun to watch, and I'm looking forward to those Logan Cooley highlight reels this year. In sixth place, I've got the St. Louis Blues. Seventh place, I've got the Winnipeg Jets. And in eighth place, I've got the Chicago Blackhawks. But like I said, 6 through 8, that's interchangeable. I could see it shaking out in any combination, honestly. Winnipeg is much lower than what their lineup dictates, and so is St. Louis, simply because I have no idea who's going to be left on their starting lineups come March. So, Tom, we're going to end right now with our question of the day, which thank you guys for joining us here again at IID Sports. And for our question of the day and for all the things we discussed, make sure you comment down below with your thoughts. Do you agree? Do you disagree with our takes? Let us know and answer the question down below, which is simple for this week. Which team is the team to beat in the division this year? Tom, I'll turn it over to you. Who's the team to beat in the Central Division this year?
Easy, Colorado and Dallas. And until I'm proven otherwise, it's probably going to be them for at least this year, next year, maybe another year. But right now it's them, and it's really been them for the last year or two before this.
Yeah, for me, it's the three-headed monster I mentioned before in Dallas, Colorado, and Minnesota. But Dallas and Colorado are juggernauts, not only in this division, not only in this conference, but in the entire NHL. Both of these teams are going to run roughshod on the NHL this year. They're going to be a lot of fun to watch. They're going to be tough matchups every week that teams are going to be prepping weeks in advance for. I feel like these are the two teams that I think are going to be the scariest in the Central Division this year, almost for sure. But once again, what do you guys think? Do you agree? Do you disagree with our takes? You got to let us know down below in the comments section. And while you're there, hit the like button if you like what we're talking about, and make sure you hit the bell notification and subscribe. Yep, subscribe down below. Let us know what you guys think. And join us next week when we preview the Atlantic Division in the Eastern Conference. So we're moving from West to East. We're going to hit up the Atlantic Division next week, so you don't want to miss that. And the only way you don't miss that is by subscribing down below, youtube.com/IID Sports. Hit the bell notification so that way you know when our videos go live. And if you're still on X, make sure you follow us down below at I80_Sports NHL. And if you follow us already, thank you guys so much, because we greatly value all of your support. But it's time to finally move away from the Western Conference here. Time to move east. or say wagons east, if you will, and move on to the Eastern Conference and move on to the Atlantic Division. But until then, I'm Brian. He's Tom. This has been yet another episode of NHL on I-80 Sports.